Hello, everybody. By everybody, I mean the 6 concurrent viewers. Z Beats, you're on time, and not only are you on time, you are right here for the grand, the grand unveiling. No, I'm just joking. I'm making this sound like a big deal, and it's not. Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you for joining me. It's good to have you all here. What's going on? Frandl, Z, Ligte, LP, Hervé, Macy G. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's doing really well. It's fantastic to have you all join me here. Chematology. I am actually very excited for today's live stream because I'm not going to say I've finished because I'm not finished yet, but I've finished enough to be able to share my latest paper. So I've been drafting this paper for quite a long time now. It took a lot longer. I was promising it for a little while, but I'm really happy with what I've drafted now. I think the only thing that needs to be done is to place the references, which hasn't been done yet, but I will be doing that. So I won't be sharing a link to it today, but we will be reading through it. And that relates to the subject. Obviously, that is the subject of today's live stream, which is the deliberate misidentification of the pharaoh in the picture. And this really is, I'm not selling it too much here, this is a really interesting tale. When you get under the hood of it and you kind of realize what's gone on, it actually reveals so much to us about what is wrong with Egyptology, what is wrong with Eurocentrism, and how they twist reality to suit their biases. This was a very satisfying study for me to undertake. And I hope when we get through this paper today, fingers crossed, we should get all through it today. I won't have that much kind of expounding that I'll need to do between, because I've basically written what I wanted to say. So I shouldn't have many regions in this live stream where I'll need to kind of stop and expound. Obviously, if people have questions, I should be able to help them with that. That's I guess the benefit of doing a live stream. I hope I can answer your questions along the way. But I think this is going to be really eye-opening to a lot of you. And I learned a lot undergoing this investigation and doing this piece of research. This is arguably one of the most important pieces of research that I've done. And it's not going to seem like that until I get started. And then as we get towards the end of the paper, I think you're going to start to realize some of the implications that this has in terms of the way that we approach ancient Kemet and the way that we interpret what we've been given. And in many ways, it's quite a good continuation of the last couple of live streams, and we'll be going through that paper, looking at the works of W.B. Du Bois and how he confronted Egyptology and confronted the powers that be, so to speak, the framework of gatekeeping, the racism, and how little has changed since then until now. In 100 years, we saw so many of the same tactics being employed. He left out live stream and the money, but I don't know what that means. But yeah, this is going to be really interesting for you. Now, let's just have a quick question before we dive into the thing, because I think it'll be good to preface this with a little bit of context. So that we're all at the same place, or we're all starting off at the same place. This bust that I've got on the screen, can anybody identify this bust to me? Tell me who it is or who it's supposed to be, where it is currently. Let's all get on equal footing before we start this live stream. So I'll wait for some answers to come in. And while you're doing that, I'm going to pull up a paper where I actually referenced this bust, because I have used this before. And that's the beautiful thing about what we do, And I actually said this reply to someone else before. The beautiful thing about what we do when we approach our studies in comparison to Eurocentrists is that we're quite happy to revise our position. At least I am. And I think most people who are grounded in truth are happy to revise their position. So a lot of people saying Amenhotep III. All right. So I think I did mention it last week. Someone said a lot of people saying Amenhotep III, and I believed this to be the case. I was one of the people who would have told you, yeah, this is Amenhotep III. And not only did I believe this to be the case, because obviously we'd been told that it was a firm identification. You know, we place so much trust, so much faith in the fact that there's good faith on the part of the curators, and we just assume, well, for them to say it's this person, there must have been an attributing, you know, cartouche, and they must have been sure that this is the person who they say it is. And the reality is that's not true. And I'm going to share an image on the screen really quickly, actually. So let me just zoom into this image. This is from my paper. Here it is. Okay. I hope this shows okay. All right. So this is my paper about Amenhotep III. And this bust, like you guys have just said, the bust is in the British Museum. So many of you would have seen it. It's the colossal bust in the British Museum, one of the biggest ones, alongside the Ramesses bust that's in the British Museum. I think this one's actually bigger. It's a big old African face. It's one of my favorite busts, actually, just because it's so, unless you're in complete denial, it's so obviously an African, and it's really hard to to deny that. Now, when I did, let me take you through this. So when I did my reconstruction of Amenhotep III, you guys know me, I look for consistency and continuation. And between you and me, let me just zoom in a little bit, if it will allow me. Yeah, it does. Okay, I'm just going to quickly zoom in the rubbish as well. Let me just try and get it isolated right here. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Bear with me. Hope you guys have all read this paper, by the way, the one that's on the screen right now. It's a good paper. Yeah, but so I'm just going to scroll and stop here. So you can see the bust here in the bottom left. And believing that this was Amenhotep III, I did some work to essentially see if this bust could agree with my existing reconstructions of Amenhotep III, which all were kind of really easy to reconcile with each other. This one, you'll notice he's fatter. So what I had to do was I had to increase his weight. And so my conclusion regarding that was that, oh, well, he must have gone older. And as he got older, he got fatter, as people do. They get fatter in the face. I'm a bit broader in the face than I used to be when I was younger. It's a normal thing. So therefore, he was just broader in the face. That being said, I managed to get it, and you're going to see why as well. I managed to get it to broadly agree with the other reconstructions, but not without some manipulation. So it's the only one that required me to change his weight. But it never like made me suspicious about the bust. It was just, okay, well, he's just a bit bigger. So how did we get from there to where we are now? So Hervé's halfway there. Hervé's mentioned Thutmose III, and he's halfway there because there's a 1909 curation book by the British Museum published. I think the lead curator was Wallace Budge at the time for the British Museum, and it has exactly the same bust, but it's labeled as Thutmose III. And I thought, well, that's odd. Why is it labeled as Thutmose III if we now know it to be Amenhotep III? But then we also know they have that statue of Sekhem Wajtawi Ra, which they've renamed Sobekhem Saf of the 17th dynasty. So we have these characters, these pharaohs, these monarchs changing identity as seemingly a normal part of curation in Egyptology, which is a questionable thing straight away. That should bring alarm bells. So as I started looking and reading into it, I realized that the attribution of this bust, or this colossal bust as Amenhotep III, was far from secure. So anyway, I put that to the side, and I was doing some other work around reconstructions. So I did a new approach to my reconstruction of Ramesses II. And as I was getting into my world of reconstruction, putting things together, I came back across this bust and I was like, what have I been? That is Ramesses. Okay, straight. I was like, when I saw it in the light of day, once again, just having all of my reference material around me, I had zero doubt that this was a bust of Ramesses II. So I thought, okay, I've got my gut instinct, but that's all I've got at the moment. All I have is my gut. I don't have anything else, but this tells me, everything is telling me that this is Ramesses II. It looks exactly like him. So I'm pulling up all of his busts and I'm like, no, this is the expression of phenotype here, the shape of the eye. I'm looking at everything, eyes, nose, lips, everything. I was like, yeah, this is Ramesses. So I was almost certain it's Ramesses. And that's when I started my really in-depth research. And I found out that, well, I was right in that when they first found this bust, it was indeed Ramesses. But they decided that it wasn't Ramesses based on location. Okay. I know that's a big question mark to you guys. We think about what we talk about, man. Location. That's where our tale begins. So we're going to go into my paper from there. I've given you a bit of a preamble, but I told you there is an entire story behind this, how it ended up being labeled as it is now. And everything about my research and all of this information that I've been able to uncover centers around the fact that this bust was re-identified to support Eurocentric notions. Now, I know you guys are probably wondering, how did we get there? How do we get from this bust being misidentified to being a quote-unquote Eurocentric conspiracy? Well, let me give you all of the evidence, okay? And that's what this paper is about. I'll be publishing this paper very soon on my website and on my academia.edu, probably within the next day or two, because it's nearly done. Like I said, all I need to do is insert the references. And I want you guys to be able to read it for yourself, but we're going to go through it together today, okay? And this will make it easy for us to basically, understand what's gone on here. But it's a really interesting bit of research that's been done here. So let me close this down and I'm going to take you to my paper. Okay, so let me zoom in. We'll get as much of the screen as we can for this live stream. And in fact, I'm going to full screen it. So I hope you're following along. Let me give a quick shout out and a thank you to Turtle Island Ados, who is sick of me saying Dubois. Said W.B. Du Bois's name is pronounced Du Bois. All right, I'll say Du Bois. I'll try to remember. It's difficult for me because we have famous Dubois or Du Boises in the UK, and it feels weird saying it. Honestly, it feels weird saying it. Yeah. So anyway, let's go through this together, okay? And this is going to be fun. Brilliant. Okay. And if you can, try not to spam my chat, Sat12, and other people. Just do me a favor and just chill out till we go through the paper, because I'm just going to say you're wrong, and then I'm going to leave it at that, okay? Yeah, I don't think you've done enough research in this area. A lot of people, in fact, this is probably a good place for us to start. A lot of people have these assumptions about what Ramesses II looks like, and they have no idea. This is the thing. They've seen his mummy, and they think they know what they're talking about, and they don't have any idea, any clue. Ramesses II is very, very highly portrayed throughout ancient Egypt, and he's portrayed very, very consistently. And thin lips is not an attribute he has. So either you don't know what you're talking about or you're making it up. So do yourself a favor, sit tight, hush, and you're going to learn something today. Okay, this will be very, very informative for you. So let's do this together. Title: Proposing the Reattribution of the Colossal Granite Head in the British Museum from Amenhotep III to Ramesses II. Critiquing the history of misattribution in ancient Egyptian portraiture. So let's do this together. So abstract: the colossal granite head housed in the British Museum, EA15, that's what we're going to refer to it as, that's its British Museum creation code, is officially attributed to Amenhotep III, with a prevailing scholarly narrative asserting that it was later usurped by Ramesses II, an act that modern curators have corrected in inverted commas. This paper challenges that attribution, arguing that the head's physiognomic traits indeed match Ramesses II from inception and was likely conceived for that monarch. Missed out a word there. Let's actually put that in now. That monarch, is that what I was supposed to say there? I don't even know. You can see as I'm writing this as I'm going along. Let's carry on. We argue that the usurpation narrative reflects Eurocentric projections of political rivalry and iconoclasm rather than ancient Egyptian cultural realities of reverence and continuity. Through comparative morphological analysis and of securely attributed, and this is important, part of this paper is trying to only reference artworks that have been securely attributed, i.e. it's really quite firm that this is the given person, i.e. it's something that's shown up in that person's tomb, or we have an attached cartouche. So that is important because there's so much out there that's hard to trust. So I've said securely attributed statuary of Amenhotep III and Ramesses II, we demonstrate the impossibility of converting one ruler's facial schema into the others as entirely impractical and overwhelmingly unsupported. So remember, these are going to be substantiated by contextual and historical evidence, such as the fine spots, archaeological circumstances, early post-excavation attributions, and alteration patterns consistent with Ramesside reuse further supports the identification of the head as that of Ramesses II. We also that the reassignment may have served to sidestep the implications of an African presenting Ramesses II within a time frame of intensifying Eurocentric historical narrative revision, where such features are more widely accepted in selected monarchs only. In this case, and this is where you need to pay attention, Amenhotep III. Okay, so they accept certain features, but only when they appear on certain pharaohs. Let's carry on. We argue that the statue's original association with Ramesses II reflects a tradition of dynastic continuity and respect, not iconoclasm and usurpation. So the bigger piece of research that's going on here is that after we prove that this is Ramesses II, and you're going to see that it is, in my opinion, obviously it's a theory, I can't say anything's 100%, but I'm going to present you with a lot of evidence that supports it. It's going to bring into question the entire narrative that we've been given of usurpation and iconoclasm, because this thing is something that has been created and sold by Egyptology, but without the reference, without the actual evidence coming from within ancient Kemet itself. Okay, let's carry on. Introduction. The British Museum's colossal granite head discovered in the Temple of Mut at Karnak is labelled as Amenhotep III in current curatorial records. The accepted narrative holds that it was created for Amenhotep III and later usurped by Ramesses II, who modified its features, presumably to match his own visage. While usurpation is a documented phenomenon in Egyptian history, there is a need to revisit many of these claims given the context of Eurocentric bias and unbridled tampering that has been prevalent since the inception of Egyptomania in the 18th century. This paper contends that in this case, the explanation of usurpation is flawed. Okay, pay attention. We argue that the head was carved for Ramesses II from the outset, supported not only by morphological evidence, but also by contextual and historical factors recorded at the time of excavation. The modern reassignment to Amenhotep III appears rooted in contextual bias, an inherited Eurocentric historiography, and possibly an avoidance of representing a version of Ramesses II with overtly non-Eurasian facial features. Okay, so let's have a look at the bust. For those of you who perhaps are unfamiliar, seeing it in its setting might help. So there's the bust in question. We've got to call it EA15 for this point forward in the paper. And it just says photograph of colossal granite head EA15 attributed to 18th dynasty ruler Amenhotep III on display in the British Museum. Okay, let's carry on. So these are some key features or views that we're going to be, let me just quickly minimize that. That's it. That we're going to be dealing with in this paper. So image 2 is a profile view of EA15 compared with a securely identified bust of Amenhotep III. So you can see it there. There's EA15, the bust. There's Amenhotep III. B is a profile view of EA15 compared with a securely identified bust of Ramesses II. So there's EA15 and there's a bust of Ramesses II. I'm sure you guys can already see the similarity between the B busts as opposed to the A busts. Okay, let's carry on. C is a front-facing view of EA15 overlaid with anthropometric coordinates used for facial comparison. So this is one of the techniques that I used for facial comparison. Okay, and you've got to see how this comes into play. Let's carry on. Historical background of the attribution. Originally, early observers in the 19th century, including those present during its excavation in 1817 by Giovanni Belzoni and Henry Beechey, associated the head, EA15, with Ramesses II, based on its physiognomy, stylistic traits, and physical inscriptions. So we have experts, when it was first excavated, saying, yes, this is Ramesses II. It looks like him, and essentially his name's here. Okay, so that's quite clear. All right, they didn't have much doubt about that. It was later misattributed to Thutmose III due to erased inscriptions and some surface alterations, reinforced by a broader academic tendency to see reinscription or recarving as usurpation. So essentially, when the curators come along and they see, well, someone's carved their name here where it didn't used to be, it's not even a case a lot of the time that something's been erased, just the fact that someone's put a new name here where it didn't used to be. They must be a usurper. Let me carry on. Eventually, the fine spot's proximity to Amenhotep III's building program led to the prevailing attribution being given to him. In other words, the fact that they found it in a temple built by Amenhotep III made them say, well, it must have been a bust of Amenhotep III and Ramesses stole it. And by the way, this is a ongoing narrative, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with, this idea that Ramesses went around claiming statues that didn't belong to him. And I've always said, impossible. I've always said that's impossible. And they've said, oh, ancient Egyptians always did that. They went around claiming statues that weren't theirs and putting their names on it. Why did I always say that's impossible? Someone put in the chat right now. Why do I think that's an impossibility? Someone tell me, what issue do I have with this? Someone tell me why. I'll wait for you guys. Why is it? Why do I say, broadly speaking, I don't buy into that narrative about these busts or these statues being claimed by pharaohs that they didn't belong to? Oh, we got a little beta male in the chat. Who's this guy? Living in another man's country with the accent. Dark. Ah, you beta? Are you beta, mate? Are you beta? Are you single? Let's try and find Asmad a wife, because he sounds lonely. Sat 12, are you still bitter because you made that thin lips comment and you're wrong? It's all right, you're going to be more wrong today, but you're in the habit of making wrong statements and being wrong and proud. So stick around. I like people like you. Embarrass yourself. Someone tell me why. All right, because the statue looked the same. Almost there. This is one of the reasons why, because ancestors were honored, and we're going to touch on that in this paper. One of the big reasons is because I do portraiture and statues of pharaohs. In fact, someone was mentioning earlier the fact that all of Ramesses' statues look like Ramesses. They look the same. Okay. And ancient Egyptian artwork is monolithic. Okay. So monolithic means that you can't alter it. They make these claims that people have come along, but you can't just slap a piece of plaster on granny diorite or add a chunk of granny diorite when it wasn't there. They're monolithic. They're carved from a single piece of stone. They have to be built to purpose. So unless the person who's being recarved has got smaller features all around, returning, for instance, Amenhotep into Ramesses is an impossibility, because Amenhotep's nose, as you're going to see here, is a lot smaller than Ramesses' nose. So there's nothing you can do about that. You can either destroy the statue of Amenhotep III and replace it, or it was never Amenhotep III to begin with. Simple. Okay. So this is the issue. And this is why their entire story around this widespread statue claiming is very, very weak, because as someone who does reconstructions, I've seen pretty much most of these statues of Senusret III, and they all look like Senusret III. Amenemhat III all look like Amenemhat III. Akhenaten. Have you ever seen a statue of Akhenaten that doesn't look like Akhenaten? Have you ever seen a stele of Akhenaten that doesn't look like Akhenaten? Have you ever seen a statue or stele of Tutankhamun that doesn't look like Tutankhamun? We know what these people look like. You know, so they make up these stories and they say them, but then when you go, or you turn around, okay, provide me the evidence, show me the statue that has been claimed that didn't belong to someone to begin with, and they really struggle to be able to do that. That's the issue that you have here, you know. And like Wesker said, you know, it'll be just as much effort, you know, making a new statue as it would to recarve one to look like an individual. That isn't a problem. And here's the issue. Here's the kicker. That isn't a problem if you're Eurocentric and you believe all black people look the same. That's not a problem. Yeah, you can sell that lie to everyone. To a lot of these Egyptologists and a lot of these Eurocentrists, all these statues look like the same person anyway. They're just unrealistic statues because they can't tell two black people apart. Simple. And that's why we end up where we end up. Let's carry on. So the persistence of Amenhotep III's label, despite what is apparently contrary morphological evidence, demonstrates how archaeological context has been allowed to override anthropological diagnostics and indigenous attribution. Okay, in other words, the labels that the ancient Egyptians themselves placed on this artwork. In this case, secondary contextual association, i.e. the find spot where they found it, and the interpretation of political intent has been given undue weight over the primary evidence, facial morphology, contemporaneous and early identification. In effect, a secondary and circumstantial detail, modern interpretation and location significance has been treated as more definitive than the unalterable stone features and inscriptions themselves. We will be exploring if this approach is beneficial or problematic in terms of our interpretation of Kemetic historical artwork. Okay. So let's go into our morphological analysis. Methodology. Conducting objective comparison between the facial portraiture of Amenhotep III and Ramesses II to correctly identify EA15. Comparison between EA15 and securely attributed statuary portraiture of Amenhotep III and Ramesses II using high-resolution photographs and facial morphological identification criteria utilized as part of the facial approximation process we've employed during previous reconstruction projects. So this is just kind of overviewing what strategy we're going to use. Bust selection. We compared a cache of digital imagery from online repository search engines and personally captured images acquired by the author on various museum visits. The criteria determining fitness for purpose was to utilize only, and these are kind of like the 4 rules that we try to stick to when it came to doing the comparisons. First of all, entirely front-facing portraits with no vertical or lateral perspective shift and taken from eye level. Telephoto photographs in excess of 50 millimeters telephoto to produce facially proportionate images. In other words, if it was a wide angle image, sometimes you get those and they kind of inflate or exaggerate the features. We left those out, so it avoided feature distortion. High resolution images, or basically high enough to not introduce well, we didn't want anything with low aperture, i.e. with the background, well, sorry, with the ears kind of like out of focus, etc., and no visible bokeh, that's blurring, of any facial features to reduce possible compression artifacts and aberrations. And finally, I've spelled aberrations wrong. That's yeah, there we go. And finally, images securely assigned to the named monarch. This was important by the way of cartouche or other archaeological accepted means of identification. Assessments assignments with ambiguity or assignments without ambiguity or controversy regarding identification. So that was quite important there. This criteria ensured that the images selected for comparison at the very least provided the consistency needed to construct a feature profile based on commonly occurring shared craniofacial traits. Okay. Let's carry on. Image 3. So this image is a composite image consisting of digitally isolated faces of statuary art. Starting clockwise from the left, we have EA15 over here, Amenhotep III life-size bust, Louvre Museum, Amenhotep III mini colossal at Luxor, Amenhotep III colossal bust, British Museum, Ramesses II colossal bust and torso, British Museum, Ramesses II full statue, Abel symbol in the middle, and Ramesses II colossal bust, Luxor. Okay, so we've got a little suite here. Anthropometric analysis of facial morphological features. Anthropometric structure overlay method. So I used a few different methods here to be honest with you. A lot of this stuff that I'm doing now, I do anyway when I'm doing my reconstructions, but I've rarely put this to paper. So this is kind of inviting you into my world a little bit now to see how we get to where we get to. So we selected 6 anthropometric coordinates to determine the morphological characteristics of the craniofacial structure of the bust in question, EA15. They were based on neoclassical facial canons used by Da Vinci and Dürer and are regularly utilized in population-based anthropological studies. So these methods that we use now are pretty uniform and they're drawn quite heavily in the field of anthropology. These are EX, EN, EXEX, Xi, Xi, Al, Chichi, and Gogo. The significance of each metric has been explained in a table below. Okay. So we have EXEN, which is a straight line distance of the exacanthion, that's the outside of the eye, to the endocanthion, that's the inner of the eye. So basically that just gives you the width of your eye. It's a fancy way of saying we measured the width of the eye. EXEX is the straight line distance between the left and right extremities or excanthion points of the corners of the eyes. You're going to see this overlaid as well, so you get an idea what this is. Xi, Xi, you guys will probably get an idea of that. That's the maximum bizygomatic breadth, your zygomatic being your cheeks. So this is the widest point of your cheeks from side to side. Okay. Al is the allay or the nasal breadth. So this gives you the width of your nose. Ch is the chelion. That's the width of your mouth. Okay, and then Gogo is the bigonial breadth, which essentially gives you the width of your mandible, okay, your lower jaw. All right. And if you just want to see those overlaid, you can see those here. So you can see EX goes from the outer eye to the outer eye, Xi from the cheek to cheek, Al from the gives you your nose width, the Chi gives you your mouth width, and the Go gives you your mandible width. Okay. And then the EX gives you the width of your eye. All right. Now this might be a little bit in depth to some of you guys, but the way I've used it is actually really easy to follow for most people. Okay, so this should be really easy to follow once we get it going. Okay. Sat 12 thinks all black people look the same. Just silence, my man. Yeah, just be quiet. You don't yeah, sitting there talking about, oh yeah, people look. Just be quiet, man. Yeah, let some Africans teach you about how this runs. And if you're African, just be quiet and learn about some diversity, man. You're talking too much, you know too little. The subject EA15 was targeted as the framework for 6 anthropological coordinates. These coordinates formed a template that could be overlaid on any bust for direct comparison between facial feature size and positioning. It is understood that such a device method doesn't quantify for front projections. So this is really good for face on. However, when it comes to actual front projections, it won't tell you how long a nose is. Now, obviously, we do address that when we look at the side profile, but this at least gives us some kind of a measuring rod for looking between busts. Now, being unable to perform precise measurements, because obviously we're not physically in front of these statues, we instead utilize measurements as a physical map. So we created a map which was then mapped onto other busts with the purpose of overlaying these fixed coordinates on top of other portraits that all adhered to the earlier established protocols for comparative photographic quality and consistency. This should ensure, regardless of size, we're able to perform a like-for-like relative comparison of the facial features for each statue. The limitations of 2D projection not accounting for facial depth is well understood at this point. So we understand what our limitations are, but we also understand what the benefits are. The next method that we use is the feature trace overlay method, which I've outlined here. It's our second comparative method, provided us with a very efficient tool of identification for facial consistencies and anomalies by utilizing a trace of the subject's features as a guide for comparing feature size and positioning. Although less data-driven, and more subjective, this method allows us to make qualitative assessment of affinities relating multiple regions of the face simultaneously and providing us with an overall comparative snapshot. So this one really was just to provide quick qualitative feedback by overlaying this map to see how close or far a portrait or statue fell from the subject, which is EA15. So the subject EA15 was targeted as the framework for facial feature tracing. The outline formed a facial outline that could be overlaid on any bust for direct comparison between the facial feature size and position. It's understood that that such a device method doesn't quantify for front facial projections. And then finally, this is the final method. I know this is a little bit heavy, but honestly, this goes past very quickly once we've gone through these. Another process that allowed us to make facial comparison without the distraction of features was to isolate the face of the subject exclusively to those features uniformly shared across all subjects. So that's why it's called normalization. These shared features are the front of face isolated from the ears, crown, neck, and beard, which are known to diverge substantially due to religious protocol and the purpose of the statuary art, even on the same subject. So by getting rid of those and just concentrating purely on the facial features, we can get something that's semi-consistent. Okay. This comparison was a very useful tool for understanding similar or divergent facial compositions at a glance. So you can see here, here's the 4 busts of Ramesses, well, EA15, I should say, and 3 confirmed busts of Ramesses. So I've said here, EA15 versus Ramesses second normalized facial isolation comparison. The normalized facial comparison with EA15, top left, and clockwise Abu Simbel, British Museum, Luxor securely attributed busts shows a broad consistency with face shape and feature proportions. The eye size of EA15 presents slightly larger, with the greatest divergence between EA15 and the Luxor bust. So you can see here, there's a bit of divergence with the eye size. Okay. Lip size also sees the largest divergence with the Luxor bust, but you can see they both have very generous lips, not thin lips like someone was suggesting earlier, who must think all black people are the same. The dorsal ridge of Abu Simbel bust presents a broader nose bridge, with EA15 acting as a intermediary. So the broadest nose bridge we have here is on the Abu Simbel bust, okay, and the British Museum bust is the most narrow, and we kind of have the EA15 bust sitting in the middle in terms of the nose bridge. The busts, broadly speaking, have good degree of similarity. So if we just look at the bust, broadly speaking, just from the face alone, we are looking at 4 very similar busts. Okay. Now let's move down to our Amenhotep III comparison. The normalized facial comparison with EA15 top left clockwise, Louvre colossal head, British Museum. So Louvre, this one's from Louvre. This is the colossal head, British Museum. This one is not colossal. This is the colossal head, British Museum. Where am I? And this is the mini colossal at Luxor. So this is slightly larger than the life size at Luxor. Securely attributed bust shows varying expressions of face shape and feature proportions. Eye size of EA15 presents taller and more almond shape. So if you look at the eye size of EA15, it's kind of a tall eye with a very pronounced almond shape. Okay, and you can see that the Amenhotep, the busts are all pretty slanty. They're all quite similar in that regard. With the greatest divergence between EA15 and the British Museum bust over here. Lip size is large, I think that's supposed to say largely similar, not larger similar. Let's just change that quickly. Is largely similar. What have I done? Press enter. There we go. Largely similar, but does not match the Amenhotep trend of having slightly larger top lip than lower. So if you look at all of Amenhotep's busts, the top lip is normally a bit larger than the bottom lip. That's pretty consistent across all of his busts. Okay, and the bust here, EA15, doesn't match that trend. Okay, the face shape is broadly similar, but with less projection at the zygomatic. Once again, British Museum statue has the greatest divergence with a longer, narrower face shape, and the EA15 sits as an intermediary between the British Museum and the Luxor face statue. Okay, so you can see it's quite divergent. There's some similarity, but it's much further away, I think we could all agree, than the Ramesses busts. Let's carry on. Surfactant says, do you ever sleep? Support the King's Kickstarter. Please do. I'd appreciate that. And no, I haven't been getting much sleep recently, if I'm going to be totally honest with you. We got a way to go. But thank you for noticing my lack of sleep. It's probably contributing to my lack of patience with irritating people as well. Broadly speaking, the overlay comparison revealed a similar face shape between EA15 top left and all the busts from the British Museum top right, which seems to possess an exaggerated long face shape. So this is EA15 versus Amenhotep III. This perspective also reveals divergence in terms of nose widths. So this is quite important. If you look at the nose widths, you can see the Luxor statue here has a smaller nose. This one looks roughly the same, but then we've got that massive divergence in terms of the face length and the zygomatic width. And this one's got a completely different nose width to this bust over here. Okay. The bottom two busts show notable divergence compared to EA15. So you can see Amenhotep III is falling quite a bit outside of being consistent. If we perform the same with the Ramesses busts here. So EA15 versus Ramesses mask overlay. The Ramesses bust display a broad consistency in all features in terms of position and proportion with the EA15 top left mask overlay. The Luxor and British Museum bust, top right and bottom left respectively, so top right and bottom left, show a slight tilting of the lips and smaller eyes than EA15. So you can see that's one of the differences here. The lips are slightly tilted and present a little bit smaller than EA15, okay? With all other features proportionally identical. The Abu Simbel bust, bottom right, has better all-round proportions, but they are slightly less detailed. Okay, so we've got the right proportions on the Abu Simbel bust, but the level of detail isn't as strong as it is for these two busts. But we all have, broadly speaking, very, very similar faces between these four colossal busts of Ramesses. And let me get rid of that additional all-round as well. As I'm reading, I'm realizing my spelling errors, so please forgive me. This only got finished today. Let's carry on. And this is the final one. So this is us utilizing the anthropometric feature map that I spoke about earlier. So starting with Ramesses, the Ramesses bust display broadly consistent craniometric position and proportionality with EA15, nose widths ALAL, mouth widths, mandible width, face width, all show almost identical feature positions, so proportions. So you can see that they're all pretty much identical across the board. Only eye widths, ENEX, and eye positions show a minor divergence with the Abu Simbel bust top right. Okay, so we can see that one's a bit out. Abu Simbel bust, you can see the EXEX position is a bit out there. And we do know these ones have eyes that present a little bit smaller than this one as well. But broadly speaking, everything else is looking really similar in terms of these four busts. You can see it quite strongly there. Performing the same task with Amenhotep. I left one out because that was the one that was in the Louvre, because it was so divergent, and also because I think he was presenting quite young in that. So I didn't feel it was fair to leave it in for this study, although I could have done, but it was just really far out. The Amenhotep III bust shows divergence with each other. So they're quite different from each other, which is surprising. The Luxor bust top right is strongly consistent with EA15 bottom left. So these two do have quite strong position-wise feature positioning, but the British Museum bust top left show strong zygomatic and eye proportion divergence. So the British Museum bust is kind of out, especially with the face width. It doesn't taper off like you would expect. Well, and even this one does look more similar, but that's only front facing. The nose width also is too small on this bust as well. So once again, there's similarities between Amenhotep III, but it's not broadly consistent, nowhere near as consistent as we see with the Ramesside busts here. Okay. Now, this is where we kind of come on to the next part, which really starts to put the nail in the coffin here. So side profile comparison analysis. Side profile comparison provided a necessary additional aspect of comparison, allowing us to three-dimensionally perform. Let's get rid of perform there. Excuse me, finding my spelling errors as I'm going along. Three-dimensionally compare the subject and profile views of both Ramesses II and Amenhotep III. We relied on high-resolution images that were securely assigned. Side profile capture allowed us to compare nasal projection, gnathic index, and zygomatic projection. Profile view offers a vital supplementary perspective that should be coupled with the front-facing imagery when conducting anthropometric or facial approximations, drawing from predominantly 2D source material. So essentially, because we're just looking at photos, all right, we have to look at multiple angles. So this really is the kind of like was the determining factor in terms of identification. So this is EA15, and these are 6 different depictions of Amenhotep from side view. Let's have a read together. EA15 versus Amenhotep III side profile comparison. There is very broad consistency of features exhibited by all of the profile views of Amenhotep III. The portraits all, listen carefully, all exhibit full prominent lips, all of them, okay? A relatively small alveolar region, that's your top lip region, relatively small. Full projecting cheeks, okay? So they all kind of have that same feature. Some minor prognathism, so if you look at them, all the busts of Amenhotep III have got some minor prognathism. So you can see the jaw is forward from the top of the forehead and the eyes in every single one. So some prognathism. Most notably, and this is the important part to pay attention to, the dorsal ridge, or the nose bridge, is slightly concave with an upturn at the tip. That is consistent on every single depiction of Amenhotep III. Okay. Dorsal ridge slightly concave with an upturned tip. The EA15 bust far left shows some affinity, but has notable divergence from the Amenhotep III bust as a whole. The nose is convex. Okay, we can all agree that that is definitely not concave, as a convex nose with a protruding dorsal ridge, and the face is orthognathous, in other words, straight. Okay, it's not prognathous like the thing is, it's just almost straight, causing the final projection to be visibly different from the Amenhotep III portraits. Right. So I think we can all see that EA15 is quite divergent from these. Yeah, would we all agree then? Let's look down and have a look at a comparison of side views with the Ramesses busts. Okay, so I'll let you all just see that for a second. Oh, let me get rid of the comment on the screen. Let you all see that for a second. All four Ramesses busts there. All right, and I think I'm hoping you can all see what I can see there. The Ramesses busts show a very strong phenotypic consistency with the EA15 bust top left. They all portray shared convex dorsal ridge with a very rounded tip and contiguous rounded allay region. So he hasn't got like these really pronounced nostrils. It all kind of like forms into a single round tipped nose. They have full cheeks and orthognathous jaw projection. Okay, you can see very straight looking. From profile view, they all approximate to nearly identical face and obviously shared phenotype with EA15. Clockwise from top right is Abu Simbel, British Museum, and Luxor colossal busts. So we can see there's EA15, and we can see this bust was a little bit of a when I did this, I was like, how did I not see this? You know, these two are literally next to each other in the British Museum. One's facing one way, the other's facing the other way. I've walked past them a million times and it never crossed my mind until I did this exercise that they look exactly the same. Isn't that a thing? Well, this was really the kicker for me. When I saw these side projections, I was like, okay, cool. That's my gut instinct settled. This is definitely a bust of Ramesses, at least in my view. This is obviously a theory, but I think it's strongly supported. Okay. And there's just a close-up of the two British Museum ones. Okay. I think what I've written there is roughly the same as what I wrote above, so I'm not going to read it out again. And here's another view, giving us a slightly angled view. This is the Abu Simbel bust, and this is the bust at the British Museum, but we're kind of seeing it from underneath, and you can see that nose just presents itself the same. The lips present itself the same, the facial shape, the eyes are the same. This is a really, really strong phenotypic convergence in my view. These are very confluent if you're going to ask me. Okay. The Ramesses busts show a very strong phenotypic consistency with EA15 busts. The portrait shares no they I was going to say, let's just say the portrait shared convex dorsal ridge with a very rounded tip and contiguous rounded allay region. They have full cheeks and orthognathous jaw projection. From profile view, they all approximate to nearly identical face and obviously shared phenotype with EA15. Okay, let's carry on. So here are the results of that. That's it. That's the kind of facial comparison part done. But that's not the most interesting part of this study. So please stay locked into this, because this study gets much more interesting now that we've kind of got the facial comparison out of the way. And in my view, there's a strong argument to suggest this is Ramesses. So now that we're answering the question, how did it end up not being Ramesses? That's kind of what I wanted to know. How did we get where we are? Okay. And this is where it will be really interesting for you guys, I hope. Okay. So diagnostic traits of Amenhotep III: straight or slightly concave, narrow nasal bridge with a soft rounded tip with defined rounded allay. So he tends to, you find with the portraits of Amenhotep III, he has quite defined nostrils that are kind of separate from the tip of his nose. Narrower almond eyes with a downward cant. Shorter, softly bowed lips with the lip sizes presenting even, or the bottom lip presenting, no, let's just say top lip. excuse me. Top lip presenting heavier, excuse the typo. Full cheeks with high cheekbones, tapering to a rounded, mildly prognathous jawline. Dominant feature of facial portraiture is almost unanimously the lips. So if you look at a portrait of Amenhotep III, 9 out of 10 times the dominant feature, the thing that's going to catch your eye, is his lips. He has very full and dominant lips on all of his portraits. Let's look at the diagnostic traits of Ramesses II. Moderate to broad convex nasal bridge leading to a soft rounded tip and contiguous rounded allay. Wide horizontally set almond eyes with a slight bulbous protrusion. Broad lips with the top lip often presenting heavier set. No, this is incorrect. Why have I put that there? It should be even. I think I got these mixed up. That's what I did. I got them mixed up when I put it down. I'm just gonna say broad lips, and I'm just gonna take out this part. Excuse me. Sorry, guys. You know, proofreading is a great thing. Full out rounded cheeks with a sharp taper to a narrow orthognathous jawline. That's correct. I think I just had one incorrect bullet point in there. And the dominant feature of facial portraiture is almost unanimously the nose. So if you get a portrait of Ramesses, the thing that will normally grab your attention is the nose. Okay, so we've got kind of two different approaches, or at least different faces, I say, with strong facial features, but grabbing your attention for different reasons. Okay, comparative analysis and findings. The British Museum's head, EA15, convex nasal bridge, horizontal wide set almond eyes, broad lips, and planar jawline align precisely with Ramesside conventions. These features cannot be the result of later recarving. This is important now, guys. Really pay attention to this part. These features cannot be the result of later recarving from an Amenhotep III original, as altering a concave to a convex bridge or fundamentally changing the eye axis is physically implausible in monolithic granite. That's like one of the key things here. You can't change Amenhotep's slim concave nose into Ramesses II's broad convex nose. That's a physical impossibility when you're dealing with monolithic granite. Converting a concave narrow nasal bridge to a broad dominant convex nasal bridge would require the addition of stone rather than subtraction, which is materially impossible in monolithic granite. Similarly, altering narrow downward slanting eyes into wide horizontal ones would demand extensive stone removal, radically altering the face's geometry and destabilizing the carving. Okay, so I think we can all agree on that. The results of the anthropometric analysis of facial features strongly supports the assertion that the bust indeed belongs to Ramesses II and not to the later attributed Amenhotep III. The latter in profile view has features that are so divergent from the subject bust EA15 that it would be almost impossible to assume a statue of the latter Amenhotep III was modified to produce the former Ramesses. Instead, we can safely assume, due to the consistently large nasal breadth and eye width, that the statue can only have been modeled for the subject, in this case, Ramesses II. I'm going to read that again because this is really important. We can safely assume, due to the consistently larger nasal breadth and eye width, that the statue can only have been modeled for the subject, in this case, Ramesses II, or modified from a subject with even larger anthropometric features, for which Amenhotep III, due to his narrow nasal breadth and general feature incompatibility, does not qualify. So this either was a really, really big featured pharaoh who no one's ever heard of, or it was always Ramesses II. It is the conclusion of the anthropometric facial analysis that EA15 is modeled purposefully in the style of Ramesses II. The light tampering, which we're going to come on to, / modifications present on the statue are not sufficient to suggest it formally matching the features of any other known New Kingdom pharaonic candidate. The amount of material added / removed during modification, notwithstanding, is insufficient in light of the facial feature differences. So that's a strong premise that I'm presenting there. But I would definitely challenge anyone to essentially refute me on that. Okay, I'm making a very strong premise here and a very strong stance. Not only is this Ramesses, but it's always been Ramesses. Okay, I'm making that very, very clear. It's always been Ramesses, and this is why this is really important. So now we're going to start getting into motive. Okay, why we have a change of identification for this individual. Okay, corroborating evidence beyond morphology. So 4.1 is excavation context. The head was found alongside a colossal arm in the Temple of Mut at Karnak, a site reused and adapted over centuries. Now, this word reused is important that you note, okay, because reuse suggests that it fell into disrepair, was used again, fell into disrepair, was used again. Okay, I've used that word deliberately because that was the word that's been used when we research. Its presence there does not require Amenhotep III's authorship of the statue itself. So Egyptologists will say, well, Amenhotep III built this temple, so therefore every single statue in this temple must belong to Amenhotep III. That's how the mind of Egyptology works. Let's carry on. The tendency towards preferring this narrative has its foundations in assuming and projecting rivalry between domestic dynasties of ancient Kemet. So we know what they like to do. They like to suggest, well, the next dynasty that came along, or the next king that came along, was obviously jealous of the king before. So he went there, he cut off his nose, and he replaced or took his statue. That's how Egyptology thinks, right? By the way, they think this with very little to no evidence to support this. Let's carry on. The idea that a succeeding dynasty could be involved in the continuation, development, or restoration of a previous dynasty's work is rarely explored or treated cynically, with a preference towards the pervading narrative of jealousy, vandalism, and erasure, broadly described as iconoclasm. So this entire idea came from this paradigm of iconoclasm that Egyptologists have basically fabricated. They never support it with any evidence other than finding destroyed statues. And then they're like, oh, well, it must have been a previous pharaoh. Oh, he must have stolen this. Let's carry on. A narrative without substantial contemporaneous support outside of recent Eurocentric projections of this alleged common behavior. So I've just given a picture there of the Temple of Mut at Karnak, so you get an idea of where they would have found this. Okay, and there have been a lot of obviously colossal busts and stuff that have been removed from this area. And here's another view of the same Temple of Mut at Karnak. Evidence of alterations. Surface abrasion around the eyes and drilled mouth corners have been attributed to reworking practices that have been associated with Ramesside acts of iconoclasm. So on the bust of EA15, the only evidence they have of bust alteration is that the corners of the mouth have been drilled, okay? And there's some slight abrasion around the eyes. Now, hopefully you've seen the facial differences between Amenhotep III and Ramesses II suggest that that modification, whatever it was, is not responsible for that bust now looking like Ramesses and nothing like Amenhotep III. However, the reworking of statues, forgeries, and tampering, and this is where I really want you guys to pay attention, the reworking of statues, forgeries, and tampering have never been owned up to by early imperialist Europeans and later modern Egyptian authorities who continue the practice to this very day. I'm going to do my Dr. Umar Johnson and repeat that for you guys, because this is really important. The reworking of statues, forgeries, and tampering have never been owned up to by early imperialist Europeans and later modern Egyptian authorities who continue the practice to this day. So they've never produced a study and said, oh yeah, by the way, we made a whole load of fakes. They've never produced a study that said, yes, we did destroy a whole bunch, knock a whole bunch of noses off. They've never done that. And yet we're supposed to trust their reattributions and their stories of iconoclasm. Let's carry on, because I thought it would be good at this point to display some examples of Egyptian, or I should say Eurocentric handiwork. So the recent sabotage of Tutankhamun's Ushabti. This Ushabti was excavated as part of the 1920 discovery of the tomb of Tutankhamun. The black, and I should say black and white, excuse me, the black and white image clearly shows a Ushabti that is colored in consistency with the dark brown varnish target color of all untampered Tutankhamun artworks. I've given an example here in the bottom left. This would have been a target color. Brown, deep brown. That would have been a target color. It's not a hop, skip, and a jump. They even look the same below the neck. They look identical. So it's very easy to see what this should have looked like. What do you notice about the face? We can already see some fading of the face. Let's read. Okay. Restorers unilaterally decided that the brown color, deliberately and realistically targeted by the ancient Egyptian artist, was dirt, and therefore cleaned the brown whilst restoring the eye. Sorry, I'm put another comment there. Cleaned the brown whilst restoring the eyeliner and lip color. The final outcome is a clearly deliberate ethnic divergence from the original African looking artifact to a decidedly Eurasian one. So this final thing they came out with that everyone talks about it being post-op Michael Jackson, it should have looked like this. If they wanted to restore it, they knew all they had to do was replace the varnish on the face. Instead, they said, let's get rid of all of the varnish, and they've done it on his body, make it all look like this was a target color, and then restore the eyeliner. This is tampering. Okay? This is clear tampering. There's no two ways about it. Has anyone ever owned up to this tampering? No, because this is a practice. A modern example of tampering. Let's give another. So a relevant example of such tampering can be seen in the oversized statue of Sekhem Waj Tawi Ra, 13th dynasty, now on display in the British Museum, reattributed to Sobekemsaf's 17th dynasty. I've been unable to source a reason for both the damage and the reattribution from curators. So let's have a look at this one. You should be familiar with this because we've gone through it on the channel. Mini colossal statue of Sekhem Waj Tawi Ra, 13th dynasty. Pictured in 1909 in Budge collection, this statue arrived to the British Museum whole and intact, pictured on the left. Nose intact, beard intact. Today, the same statue has had attribution changed to Sobekemsaf's 17th dynasty. And yes, it is the same statue. We've confirmed that 1,000,000 times over. It's absolutely identical. It has been deliberately sabotaged, and the brow line shows drill holes not seen in the original. So can you guys see there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 drill holes along the brow line, almost as though maybe they're thinking about chiseling, getting rid of the whole face. Probably wanted it to snap or something like that. Either which way, this is the most obvious and deliberate sabotage. This seemingly targeted destruction has no record or explanation given by curators. No record. Okay, nothing. So it arrives to the British Museum like this 100 years ago. It ends up like this, and we have no curation record detailing how it got there. And yet we're just supposed to trust that these people are telling us the truth when it comes to these tales. Shout out Drega001. Thank you very much for your $2 donation. I appreciate it, man. Vandalizing and hiding one's hand. Indeed. So anyway, I've just given those 2 examples. I could have given loads, by the way, but I just gave those 2 examples so that when we make accusations of foul play, they don't fall on deaf ears. People can see that there is a practice of foul play when it comes to Egyptian authorities and or Eurocentrists. Okay, so I like to give an example of both here. This would be fault line in the hand probably of the Egyptian authorities, and this one would be fault line in the hand of British Museum. That would be Eurocentric authorities. Okay, Its misappropriation in both name and its misappropriation in both name and dispensation have been accompanied by targeted vandalism and tampering, which involves what we can assume to be the deliberate removal of the nose and false beard and narrow drill holes across the brow. This brings into question how much facial tampering attributed to the dynastic era, because if we didn't pull up the photo, or we weren't fortunate enough to have this 1909 photo of this statue, what do you think they would be saying was the reason this nose was missing? I think we all know they would say, oh, it's iconoclasm. This was done by Akhenaten in an act of vengeance against his 17th dynasty relative. He wanted to, like, they'll just make some shizzle up. Okay. They can't do that because we have this video, this image here, which proves that they did it. How many noses in ancient Egypt do you have that look like that have survived, by the way? How many noses with these particular features have survived in ancient Egypt? Anyway, let's carry on. This brings into question how much facial tampering attributed to the dynastic era is actually attributable to a consistent pattern of vandalism that European creators have never historically been made accountable for. Even in a case such as this, where the act is exclusively traceable to them. Okay. In this case, the act is exclusively traceable to them. They can't deny it. They can't turn around and say, oh, no, this got nothing. It's 100% you, British Museum. You can't deny it. Okay. And this would have probably been under the watch of Petrie, you know, around that period of time. Attribution history. Early identification of Belzoni's team linked the head, we're back to EA15 now, to Ramesses II. The shift to Amenhotep III was a later scholarly development heavily influenced by context bias rather than physical evidence. One must bring into question how much of the re-identification was influenced by narrative bias or even an effort to obscure a trail of tampering that could lead back to European perpetrators as opposed to rival Kemetic dynasties. So that bust of Ramesses, they said, oh, the corners of the mouth has been drilled. Well, looky here. Who likes to drill statues? You do. Oh, and the eye lines have been tampered. There's massive tampering around the eye lines. Oh, well, here, who likes to tamper eye lines? You do. So you're saying that, oh, well, you know, it was Ramesses. He came along and he changed it. Maybe you found it was Ramesses and you wanted to change his face because you have a habit of doing that, clearly. Let's carry on. The supported claim for reattribution for reattribution lies, excuse me, there we go, lies with evidence of two visible modifications being made to the statue. These are generally accepted to be heavy cosmetic lines around the eyes, which have been abraded. The corners of the mouth have been drilled. Once again, drilled. What kind of iconoclast has got time to be doing drilling? Anyway, carry on. Neither of these alleged modifications are capable of changing the shapes of these features substantially enough to transform it from being the likeness of Amenhotep III to a likeness for Ramesses II. I think the evidence now weights, that should be, excuse me, I've used the wrong weight there. Weights, have I spelled that right? Yeah. Now weights towards these claims being unsupported conjecture without the requisite support to be considered as robust enough for a change of identification for the individual. So in other words, the evidence they've supplied is rubbish. Okay. They haven't provided any good evidence that it's Amenhotep III. They've just said it's Amenhotep III because we say it's Amenhotep III and we found it in his temple. But here's another point. It's confirmed by the British Museum that the torso inscription for the statue has been completely effaced. In other words, the torso inscription doesn't show anything. We can't read it. It's unreadable, which forces us in best faith to believe the perpetrators of this act must have been other dynasties. Yet, The evidence and known history of racism and the artifact manipulation slash vandalism that I have evidenced in this paper at least allows us to bring into question another possible reason for such effacement. That being the perpetrators of said act could have been early imperious curators who wanted to control the narrative of identification for specific monarchs based on ideals of race that were responsible for funding expeditions to Egypt. Okay, so they're getting there and they know, hey, don't be bringing back Ramesses looking too black. The dominant usurpation framing reflects Eurocentric projections of rivalry, ignoring the Egyptian conception of kingship as cyclical and continuous. Now, this is really key here. Okay. The Egyptian worldview versus the Eurocentric worldview has been projected onto the ancient Egyptians or onto the ancient Kemetic people. Ancient historians spoke of how forbidden the tampering of art was within the wider ancient Egyptian context. In this worldview, what is seen as reinscription, and this is key. If you haven't paid attention to anything at the moment, pay attention to this because this is key. In this worldview, what is seen as reinscription could be an act of reverence, updating, or restoration rather than hostility and replacement. So the idea being that Ramesses, if his statue ends up in the temple of Amenhotep III, was not him taking over the temple, but Amenhotep III has built that temple with the idea that succeeding dynasties and succeeding pharaohs are going to place their statues within this temple. There's room for those pharaohs because they see this as a continuous thing. They don't see the people who come after them as competitors. They see them as ancestors and they see them as descendants. This never crosses the mind of Egyptology. One analogy I can think of is when you go to university, and then when you're in a university hall, this is just something that just crossed my mind, and it's relatively unrelated, but it's a similar kind of concept. You go to a university hall, and you're in the hall, and it has the plaque, and the plaque, it has a plaque, and the plaque has the name of the deans of the university. And there's also another plaque that maybe has all of the head boys, and another plaque that has all of the head girls, and another plaque that has all of, it's continually being updated. Okay. You don't have people come 10 years later and then burn the university down and then start it again. There's greatness in the heritage that you are moving into. It would have been an honor for Ramesses to place his statue within the temple that was first built by Amenhotep III. That would have been an honor. But this whole idea, this whole narrative of usurpation and iconoclasm that Europeans have created to make every single act that was committed by the ancient Egyptians or by the Kemetic people as being some kind of an act of sabotage. That's them projecting their own discontented, vandalistic behavior. They are, sorry, I'm going to say this right now. The word vandalism comes from the Vandals. So peculiar was their behavior in the context of history that a new word was created from it. Okay, they had to create a new word. Who are these weird people that go around destroying everything and changing everything and putting their names where they don't belong? Ramesses was not a Vandal. Amenhotep III was not a Vandal. None of these ancient Egyptian pharaohs were Vandals. You know who are Vandals? Vandals. Vandals are Vandals. Yeah. So what they're doing is they're projecting their own history of usurpation, of vandalism, of iconoclasm, and they're trying to make sure, or at least project it into a society where it doesn't fit. If you find a statue of Ramesses II in the temple of Amenhotep III, that's because it belonged there. It was built for him. There was no insult. He didn't need to build his own temple because he's not Amenhotep III. We were able to keep dynasties continuing to go. There's nothing Absolutely nothing peculiar about that. In fact, there's a really interesting quote. Let me share this with you. I shared this on my other paper. Sorry, I got to put this on the screen because this is hilarious. You're rewriting history to your own liking. Sorry. I'm sorry. Is this Eurocentric projectionism? Yeah, here. I'm rewriting history. I tell you what you can do. Provide one piece of evidence, contemporaneous evidence of iconoclasm. Yeah? One piece of evidence of contemporary iconoclasm. Contemporaneous, yeah? Do that, and then we'll see what you have to say about that. Because I can provide evidence of what I'm saying. I'm about to pull up a quote supporting what I'm saying. I've provided evidence in this live stream of what I'm saying. Are you able to provide evidence of what you're saying? No. I don't care if you're Eurocentric or not. It just is what it is. Because these people like to come and they like to think that we have to buy into the nonsense. And that's exactly what we're not going to do here. Okay? There's no rewriting of history. There is. What we're doing is writing history. Okay? We're erasing the errors that have been placed there by Eurocentrists. Yeah. So feel free to provide your evidence, any evidence of iconoclasm, where a pharaoh said, I'm going to destroy the faces of the statues. Fine. It should be easy to find. It went on so often. Should be no problem. We're glad to wait for you. And we know it won't come, by the way. But anyway, let me find that quote for you guys. Just give me one moment, because I think it's a good quote. It's fitting. I was going to put it in the paper, but I think somewhere between me getting really tired as I was writing this, I didn't manage to pull up the quote, but I'll find it now because it's a good one. Okay, this shouldn't take long. It's a really cool quote. I found it in it's by Mustafa Gadala. I found it in one of his books. And I was like, yes, that's going to be very useful. I hope I can find it. Bear with me. Here we go. All right, so it's a quote by Plato. Okay, so this is a quote by Plato, and let me just read it out to you, because this is a really important quote in terms of understanding, and I've just lost it. I just zoomed in, I lost it. Oh dear. Okay, let me zoom up. No. Don't play with Zoom when you got your quote on the screen. Here it is. So here's the quote. Okay, so this is by Plato, and Plato's talking about the ancient Egyptians and their attitude toward artwork. And it says here quite clearly, to this day, no alteration is allowed either in these arts or music at all. Okay, so no alteration is allowed. That was very, very clear. He was speaking about their artwork. It's forbidden for them to do any kind of alteration. You leave them exactly as they are. Okay, so that was a very clear quote about the ancient Egyptian approach, or at least their beliefs around tampering works. Okay, it wasn't allowed. It was very much forbidden amongst the ancient Egyptians. So I've said here there's an important work that needs to be explored around the compounding effect of artwork continuity protocols in ancient Kemet that may paint a very different picture to the one presented by modern Egyptology. And you know what, just to be really clear about this, I'm actually really glad that whoever that person is said I'm rewriting history. That is absolutely my intention, man. Let me make it very, very clear. We are not here to be compatible with Egyptology. If you missed the last live stream, which you probably didn't because you haters always find your way into my live streams, the people who hate me the most are in every single live stream. Yeah, every single live stream. People that hate me the most. They're here all the time. Here's another one. We're going to do just that. Sorry, this is well. Chipuka Makazi, we're going to do just that. We're going to do exactly that. He said, I dare to release evidence E7 published the fully secret. Okay, we're going to do just that. And I'm going to show you how stupid you and E7 are. We're going to do just that. So we'll come back to that. Please, guys, hold that thought, because just to embarrass this clown, I'm going to do that. So make sure I come back to this. It's only a 1-minute video. And I already destroyed him in his comments. So clearly you are not paying attention, but stick around because I'm going to destroy that. I don't really normally do this on my channel because I don't like to give any of these channels any kind of publicity on my channel. So I'm not going to tell you who E7 is. I'm not going to give you any details about that. But what I will do is I will show you how wrong these people are, because we are wrecking their world right now in terms of this kind of work that we're doing here. But let's carry on anyway. In this context, it becomes possible to reframe the monument as an example of dynastic continuity and respect, aligning the 19th dynasty ruler with monumental legacy of the 18th dynasty. Okay. And yes, we want to rewrite history. We want African researchers and scholars to view history in this way, because the poison, the consistent poison that has been dripping out of Egyptology over, African achievements needs to be erased. It needs to be entirely rewritten. We don't need Eurocentric people interpreting the history of Africa, because they are poisonous and they get it wrong. And they're trying to, project their destructive, vandal personality onto ancient Africans, and we need to reject it at source. Absolutely. This is what I'm doing. If you think I'm rewriting history, thank you. Thank you very much, because that very much is my intention. Okay, so I want you to know that. Certain Ramesside heads present heads with very similar features to EA15, whereas the noses appear somewhat more contoured. This is true for all but the bust present on the Abu Simbel temple monument. Okay, so Abu Simbel is the only one that maybe the noses don't feel more contoured. In contrast to this, the EA15 head retains pronounced African features seen in its broader nasal structure. So it's just a bit fuller, okay? Slightly rounder shaped lips and more prominent pronounced zygomatic region projecting cheeks and cheekbones. Within the current dominant narrative, very much influenced by Eurocentric narrative context, where Ramesses II is often reimagined with Levantine or Mediterranean traits, an African presenting Ramesses II challenges entrenched racialized ideas of this influential monarch, reassigning such a head to Amenhotep III, whose identity is already generally accepted in scholarship as more closely associated with African or Nubian descent, sidesteps the challenge of publicly associating Ramesses II with this potentially disruptive African morphology presented on EA15. So it's kind of like it's in the British Museum. We know that's what Ramesses broadly looks like. But I think for people to be confronted with this very unquestionably African face in the middle of the British Museum, it's easier for them to reassign it as Amenhotep III. Now, this is just a theory. I've obviously said that. I'm quite open about that. I don't have any proof for that, but the proof is the behavior for me. So it's just something that I'll present as a possibility. Now, image 18, comparative ethnomorphology. Left is a reconstruction of Ramesses by myself. I did this before the attribution of this bust. This artistic rendering was based on available portraiture of Ramesses II. The EA15 bust was not attributed to Ramesses II when this was constructed. Okay. Center is the EA15 bust in the British Museum, and right is the forensic reconstruction of Ramesses II by Carolyn Wilkinson. Okay. And I think it's fair to say that the reconstruction of Ramesses on the left, constructed using his other art pieces, approximates to a much closer rendition than the forensic reconstruction on the right. Yeah, I think most of you would agree that one, well, at least in my perspective, one looks like him and the other one doesn't really. This strengthens the suggestion that the bust more naturally leans towards features one associates with native African phenotype than the more typically Middle Eastern phenotype seen in forensic reconstruction. Okay, so we can all see that there. So let's move on. Bad faith in reattribution. Restoring the statue's identity to Ramesses II reframes it not as an example of appropriation, but as an expression of dynastic continuity and respect. In this reading, Ramesses II's presence in the Temple of Mut is a deliberate placement within a tradition of monumental kingship, aligning himself with Amenhotep III's enduring legacy. I'm going to read that again, okay? Restoring the statue's identity to Ramesses II reframes it not as an example of appropriation, but as an expression of dynastic continuity and respect, something that was expected between dynasties. Feel like I'm rewriting history? Good. Let it ache you. In this reading, Ramesses II's presence in the Temple of Mut is a deliberate placement within a tradition of monumental kingship, aligning himself with Amenhotep III's enduring legacy. The reattribution appears to be driven by contextual bias from the find spot, preference for usurpation narrative consistent with Eurocentric historiography, vandalism, in other words, visual politics around racial representation, and institutional reluctance to overturn entrenched labels. We saw how prevalent racism was in early Egyptology. How many modern Egyptologists, in spite of knowing how racist early Egyptology was, attempt to revise their conclusions? How many? How many modern Egyptologists question the attributions of pharaohs based on the fact that, hey, you know, the people who said these purple people were these people, you know, they were really racist, right? Yeah, I know they were really racist. Okay, so are we going to believe everything they say? Shouldn't we be either rejecting what they said or at least running it through some kind of anti-racism filter? How many people have done that? How many Egyptologists have done that? They haven't. Okay, so we're going to do it. We're not going to sit and wait for them. We're going to write it, rewrite it, and write it. I love that. I love that. Okay, we're going to write it, rewrite it, and write it. We don't need their permission. If you don't like what I'm doing on this channel, respectfully piss off. But you won't, because the thing about it is the reason my channel is so full of these haters who watch my 2-hour, 3-hour live streams, go back, watch my content, is because they know it's flipping correct. That's why they're here. That's why they're always here, sitting there with the, oh, you know, Sat 12 every time comes in, oh, well, King's Mono, you should do this, you should do that. If you don't like my content, you know where to go, but you're always here, every live stream, sitting down here for 2 hours, criticizing. So it says to me, you know that what I'm saying is correct, and you're just dissenting because, you know, maybe I don't agree with you 100%. I couldn't care less. I will keep doing what I'm doing. Yeah, I will keep doing exactly what I'm doing. Thank you very much, Yelen Tala, for your 11 euros. It's much appreciated. Okay, much appreciated. So let's carry on. Yeah, let's carry on. Let's get to the end of this because I think we're very near the end of the paper. And I'm actually looking forward to doing the other exercise, embarrassing that E7 clown, because why not? We'll do that live as well. Such practices risks distorting our understanding of ancient Nile Valley politics, cultural dynamics, reducing it to a mirror of European feudal rivalry, rather than recognizing it within the context of Africa's own ontological and ideological structures. One could argue that the behavior of iconoclasm being attributed to the Nile Valley rulers is in direct conflict to what we know of the spiritual systems that were celebrated in the tombs of all the monarchs and nobles. Okay, and I was supposed to put a quote in here from Ma'at, which would have supported that, and I completely forgot to put it in there. But we know that they were all buried with the Book of the Dead, and it spoke about things like honoring your ancestors. We know about all of those things that were there, written in there. So we're supposed to believe they lived a life in complete contradiction to the very words that they were buried with. We're supposed to believe that. We know that's not the case. But what's happened is Eurocentrism has sold us a version of Egyptology that is poisoned. It's a poison chalice, and we need to reject it at source. Okay, let's just read the conclusion and be done. The colossal head in the British Museum aligns morphologically, contextually, and historically with Ramesses II. The prevailing Amenhotep III attribution rests on weak contextual association and reflects Eurocentric biases in Egyptological interpretation, including avoidance of African presenting Ramesses II imagery. Recognizing the head as originally Ramesside not only corrects an art historical misattribution, but also invites a reevaluation of how modern biases have shaped the interpretation of ancient Egyptian art and kingship. End of. Okay, so that brings us to a nice conclusion of that study. Okay, I'm really happy with that. You can see I've got a little bit of work to do before I publish it, but I think the support for the arguments is incredibly strong. And I don't think, I mean, I'd welcome anyone to write a refutation, okay, or build a refutation of that theory, but I think you'd struggle. So good luck with that anyway. I'm not going to reply to Satwell because he doesn't know what he's talking about. Let's go back anyway. So before I go through, in fact, I'm just looking through the comments. How doesn't look like anyone's really asked me any questions. So let's have a little, we're going to do a little side quest. It's approaching 2 hours, but I'm just going to cook someone really quickly because I was going to ignore this person. But since this person came in my chat and they're like, oh, I dare you to mention the video that E7's this idiot who makes videos about me all the time. They're all as rubbish as the one I'm about to show you. I rarely engage him. In fact, I've got another channel called The King Mono Show where I normally do side quests like this. So when it comes to like these idiots who are kind of like obsessed with my channel and don't have anything to do other than make content around what I make, I don't give them any platform on the main channel. What they do is they get the side quest channel where I'm a bit more petty and I'm a bit more silly and I do stuff like that. Cool. I'm normally happy to do that. However, on this occasion, since someone's come into my chat and they're like, oh, and they think they've really got they think they've really scored a goal here. They're like, oh yeah, he's come out of a video and he refutes you. So let's have a look at one of these silly refutations that I get so often. It's a minute-long video. So I'll watch the video and then no one can accuse me of taking him out of context. Then I'm going to destroy him at source because it's really easy to do because these idiots don't know how to read. So let's do that really quickly. So I'm just going to quickly pull up the video and then we'll get cooking on this. Why not? Why not? A little bit of a bonus feature. Let's call it a bonus feature. He said, don't show it. Don't worry. I won't show his username or anything like that. I'm literally just going to show you what the and you don't hear his voice either. He's too much of a coward to speak because he pretends to his audience that he's a girl, which is another one of his it's another one of his. So he's the villain of the week that I'm about to wreck. Okay. Don't worry. I'm not going to give him any kind of like, he's not going to gain anything from this other than ass whooping, which he can then start lying to his little desperate crowd about as well. So let's deal with this side quest. And there's no sound, so we won't play any sound either. Okay. Just remove him from the screen because I don't even want to share his username. And we're going to wreck this side quest right now. Okay, everyone can see that? Oh, I've got to put the audio on 1 second. Stop screen. So share screen. Entire screen. There it is. And audio on. There we go. Okay, cool. Let's go. Let's go. So I'm going to just play this for you guys. So apparently I lied about Neurat QP ADM modeling with ancient East African genomes. Let's have a look. See what I said. The inputs of this database are all Eurasian. Remember I showed you this map yesterday. These are the inputs of the database. Okay, so you can see the inputs of the database for the QP ADM modeling that they used. They did not, in the QP ADM modeling, put a single African genome apart from the Moroccan ones.
Kenyans from...
So just to be clear, yeah, so he's played me there, and I think my premise was very, very clear. When they modeled Neurat Man, they modeled him against only the North Africans and everyone else was Eurasian. That was my premise, wasn't it? Very, very clear. Everyone clear on that? Yeah? Everyone clear on that? That was my premises. Now, this is where he's going to prove me wrong. He's going to prove me wrong using the supplementary data. So let's play this.
The Late Stone Age, Neolithic, Pastoral Iron Age, and Late Iron Age. 201 samples in all, including individuals from Tanzania and Botswana for comparison. It's a major blow to Afrocentrism. QP two-way admixture modeling with East...
Sorry, is there no sound? Guys, let me know if you can hear the sound. Just put a 1 or 2 if you can hear the sound or not hear the sound. You can? Okay, so you can hear the sound. Okay, let me let it carry on playing. You have to turn up your system, Campbell Soup.
Africans shows that ancient Kenyans, including Dinka, Ethiopians, Congolese, and Khoisan Bushmen, consistently failed to cluster with Neurat, regardless of time period or location. None of the samples fit, which is why they weren't included in the main analysis of the paper. So when he claims that the authors didn't include a single sub-Saharan or East African genome or didn't perform two-way admixture modeling with them, he's lying.
We can read here, ancestry proportion of Neurat and comparative Bronze Age Levantine Anatolian genomes for the best fit of the full QP ADM model.
And that's a wrap. Have a nice day, everyone.
So there you go. So that's his woo, swoosh. He cooked me, didn't he, guys? He cooked me because I made the claim, yeah, that they didn't include any East Africans. And clearly he just showed you a QP ADM that did take place, yeah. Whole bunch of East Africans who were involved in that test. And word for word, he said they consistently did not cluster with Neurat Man. That was his claim. Let's see if he was being honest about that. Because unfortunately, him and the idiots that follow him, like the guy who was in my comments thinking he got a swoosh, does not know how to read. So let's help these idiots and teach them how to read. Let's deal with this side villain of the week. So in fact, I'm going to do this live in front of you so you can see how easy it is to debunk these idiots. Okay, how easy
Africa speak
idiots. So I'm going to quickly just type in whole genome. Let's pull up the study live, okay, of Old Kingdom Egyptian. Let's do this live. Live is cool. So there it is. Here's the Nature article. We want to get it in full. We need it in full, don't we? So let's find that test that he referred to. Okay, let's find that test. So here we go. I'm just going to type in here. So let me just do a quick find. Okay, so let's have a look here. Let's see what's going on here. So here's let's first of all scroll up because this gives you a nice little overview of the different QP-ADM modeling tests that took place. Okay, so here's Neurat genome ancestry modeling. Okay, we first estimated the Neurat genome, blah, 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 North African, West Asian, and we know from here, it tells you all the sources they use: Levant, Anatolia, Morocco, Levant, blah, 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 Neolithic, no Africans apart from the North Africans. So that's very, very clear. Yeah, that's very, very clear. We can see that here. Yeah, you can read through it in your own time. Let's see the test that he just referenced, which he said, oh, well, they did test against Neurat and it didn't cluster and you've lied to your audience. Let's see. Ancient East African ancestry modeling. Now, pay attention, guys, because people like him can't read. So if you're watching my content like you probably are, Ernesto, let me read for you. We estimated the ancestry proportion in ancient East African using both Neurat, that's Neurat man, NUE001, and Levant Chalcolithic genomes as competing sources for the Eurasian-like component. It says it here. So let me explain what that means. This test was not to see if East Africans cluster with Neurat man. What they did after modeling Neurat man, so after they modeled Neurat man and he came out a percentage Eurasian, they got a bunch of old East African genomes and they were like, let's see if Neurat man models closer to the Eurasian element so we can get rid of the Eurasians and use him instead of the Eurasian element. So this is them putting their already modeled genome to utility. It's a very, very common practice when you have these kinds of tests. They did the same thing with the Takarori test when they had the North African women, the Libyan women who they got the genome from. And then once they got their genome, they were like, well, let's model, now that we've modeled it and we know what they're made up from, let's use her in older tests and see if we can replace other people with them. There was no effort here to model Neurat man. Okay, it's quite clear here. They didn't say we modeled Neurat man. They're modeling ancient East Africans and they're using Neurat man as one of the sources. It's a completely different thing. So what he's doing is he's lying to his dim audience who just need King's monologue to be bad, oh, to be wrong, oh, he's a liar, oh, he's evil. King's monologue just read the paper. Okay, guys, it's not that difficult. Okay, guys, when you just read the paper, you realize that I didn't do any embellishment. I can read this and it will agree exactly with what I said. The only Africans in here are North Africans. The test you've referred to, the QPADM test, which you saw the words QPADM when you thought you'd got a slam dunk, has got nothing to do with modeling Neurat man. It says quite clearly here, using Neurat man and Levantine Chalcolithic genomes as competing sources for the Eurasian-like component. Using both Neurat man and Levantine Chalcolithic genomes as competing sources for the Eurasian component. We're not trying to model Neurat man there. You are as dumb as two bricks. Okay? So guys, before you try to come at me and you make videos and then you come into my chat and be like, oh, I dare you to show Ito. Are you happy with that now? Chipuka? Yeah? So I dared. Do you want to come back with something now? Are you going to tell me I'm lying? Do you want to, anyone? Any other Eurocentrists in there want to tell me that I'm lying? Or did you not understand this? I bet you didn't understand this because the thing about this channel is we don't pretend to be geneticists. Yeah. Hence we don't embellish stuff. Yeah. It doesn't matter. See, this is the thing. You're too dumb. You're not realizing this. It doesn't matter what the supplementary table says in its totality. They've told you the purpose of the test here, and it wasn't to model Neurat man. End of discussion. You can look at the supplementary data in your own time. I know it contains East Africans, but they're comparing East Africans and NUE, Neurat man, to model for the Eurasian-like component. If you don't understand that, you're too dumb. So I'm not going to do that with you. I'm not your teacher. If you want a qualified geneticist to take you through this, feel free to do that. We're not doing it on my channel. You've been cooked. That's it. You have no point. Now you can go back and run back to your hero. You are wrong. End of discussion. Okay. End of discussion. So let's move on. No, the comments aren't off. Okay. You're in the chat, you moron. This guy's such a moron. Anyway, keep it up and you will be blocked because you're just an annoyance now. Anyway, he's been cooked at that point. So I think at that point we can actually be done. All right. It doesn't take a genius, guys. I've got it on the screen there. And as you can see with Eurocentrists like this idiot in the chat, even with the purpose of the test being in the screen and it clearly saying they did not model or use the East Africans to model against Nurat man, he'll keep talking because that's all these idiots do. They'll keep talking and talking and talking and talking and talking because they have no brain. So there's no point in even going back and forth with them. So we're done there. And then they'll make accusations. Oh, you turned off the comments. You did this, you did that. It's like, mate, you're not smart enough for me to turn off comments for you. You don't have the cognitive ability for me to even think that it's worth turning off comments for you. You're pointless. Okay. So that's it. All right. So guys, I think we are done there. We've had a good live stream. I hope you enjoyed that. And I've just taken us back to the paper that I showed you. I really hope that we can, I'm going to publish it soon. And I want to see if we can use this as a bit of a launch point to really start to push against and push back against some of the narratives that we've been fed. We've been fed so much false narratives. You know, they've misattributed Ramesses II. And, you know, it's really affecting the way that we absorb history. So why not completely discard that and start to question things? What I find is the more you question things from the base, the better the results that you get are. It's really, really important for us to do that. Thank you very, very much, Kuroe. It was an excellent presentation. I much appreciate that. You guys can see what Ramesses' face looks like. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that. Make sure you hit up the likes before you go. We've got 129 likes. We've got 200 in the live chat. So let's at least get it up to 200. Haters, you're always welcome. If you want to, I will cook you on the live if that's what you need to be done. Okay. But I think we've made our point now. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's Sunday, so I'm going to chill now. And yeah, none of them will have a live debate. And so people are saying that. And to be honest with you, a lot of them, they'll only benefit from debating me live anyway. So, you know, it is what it is. You are 3 minutes behind, but I haven't done the live. I haven't canceled the live yet. So thank you very much, Surfactant, for your $10 donation. I'm glad that you've, yeah, I'm not sure how far behind you are, but yeah, you can see they have no point. And they, you know, imagine going away and making an entire video to try and refute that point and then being wrong. Imagine how stupid you have to be. Anyway, end of discussion. Let me not go into that too much. Guys, have a fantastic weekend. And I hopefully will see you tomorrow, potentially the day after. We'll see. It all depends on what I could cook up in the next day or so. All right, but it's been fun. Thanks, guys. Have a fantastic time. Okay. Peace, guys.